Welcome to the Save vs. Poison podcast, the podcast dedicated to gaming, general geekery, and enduring sobriety in an ever-maddening society, with your host Will and two guys that probably live under his stairs. If you're an addict, know an addict, or are just interested in exploring the outer mysteries of geekery, you're in the right place. Without further ado, let's get to the show. Welcome back to the show, everybody. How are you today, my friends? It's Wednesday. I didn't start recording until Wednesday. That's terrible. And you should all shame me for not getting this done until Wednesday. Normally, I wanted this episode done, edited, extruded from my brain, and vomited out onto the internet at least 5 hours ago. But sometimes life doesn't find a way to get it done when you need it to. Little Jeff Goldblum moment in my head there. Life finds a way. Yeah. I love Jeff Goldblum. If you guys don't like Jeff Goldblum, I don't know that we can be friends anymore. I think that'll be the last of all of our friendships. All right. If you don't like Seagal or Cage or Gold Bloom. I fucking forgot his name halfway through it after having said it 2 seconds ago. That is wild. That is like my cognitive abilities as I'm getting older certainly seem to be slipping rapidly, very rapidly, highly rapidly. They would sometimes call what I have late stage, early onset Alzheimer's, yeah, or my grandfather would call it halfheimers. Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Will. I'm your host here on the Save vs. Poison podcast. As well as being a host, I'm also an alcoholic in recovery. I know, surprise, surprise. Ta-da! If it's your first episode, boy, are you in for a treat, because I don't have any of my co-hosts with me tonight. Steve is currently writing a script where a man plans and executes a donut burglary set in a police station. He's calling the movie Glazed and Tased and says it's going to be a wonderful romantic comedy. Tiki is not joining us because he's on assignment trying to get Steven Seagal to play the lead in co-host Steve's movie. Because we're hoping to use it as a pilot for money laundering. Because everything Seagal is in has to be a money laundering operation. There's no two ways about it, right? You can't make that many terrible movies be that big in Putin's pocket and not be making all sorts of monetary transactions in the name of Russian oligarchy. I'm just saying it. I'm saying it right here. All right, we've had that conspiracy theory going. We've got the windmills are currently what is controlling the rotation of the Earth. Which I think is a much better conspiracy theory than the flat Earth stuff. Like, I think it's way better. I think the science is there, you guys. I think it's there. And if you don't, go do your own research, all right? There's a reason that we say Don Quixote was right, because he was tilting at windmills, but he knew that those windmills were the cause of global warming. Just saying it here, all right? Just saying it right here, right now. You guys enjoy that, all right? Enjoy that. Enjoy it 100%. If you're joining us on YouTube, up in the left or right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a picture of Dr. Andrew Huberman. Dr. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist and professor of ophthalmology, and a pretty brilliant guy. He's got a YouTube channel that we're going to have the notes. We'll have the link in the show notes for this episode, because I think that the guy has got just some fantastic stuff. We're going to go over a little bit of an episode that he did detailing alcohol and its effects on the human body. It's just going to be a brief summation, because what I want you to do is I want you to go to listen to this guy talk. He's a really fascinating guy, and he's got some pretty great videos. I spent yesterday going over the entirety of the video to see if it passed my completely unscientific sniff test. And guess what? Didn't smell like poop, you guys. Didn't smell like poop at all. So really, really excited about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about boundaries today. And yeah, that's the creation, the assertion, and the reinforcement of boundaries and why they're so incredibly important in our journey through recovery. I don't have any gaming content for us today. This is going to be pretty much just me, some alcoholism chat, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll let you guys all get back to walking your dog, cooking dinner, or sitting on the toilet, which is what I imagine most of you guys are doing while you're listening to this. I feel like if you're going to have shit go in your ear, you should probably have shit come out of your butt. That's what I think that you should be doing, all right? So if you're not listening to this on the toilet, you should be. I think it's the perfect place for it, all right? You relaxed, a door locked, you can hide your shame from the world. People won't be like, what podcasts are you listening to? Well, we're listening to Save versus Poison. You should be ashamed of yourself. Phi and shame. Phi and shame. So, yeah. Personally, this has been a wild week. It's been just a lot of... It's weird to say I have a very suburban life. Well, maybe it's not weird to say I have a suburban life. I have a suburban life. Sometimes it feels busier than I expect it to, but the last couple of days, I mean, the reason that we're recording this on a Wednesday instead of having done it on Monday or Tuesday like we normally would was because I couldn't make the timing work. I had too much stuff going on. It doesn't help that the Colorado Avalanche, I'm wearing the t-shirt right now, Colorado Avalanche are in the playoffs, and of course their playoff nights are all just happen to fall on evenings when I would normally be doing something content creation related. So instead, I wanted to watch the game. So I can't watch the game and make the podcast happen at the same time. There's just no way. Like, we'd be talking about something really, really, vulnerable. Like Tiki would be bearing his soul to me, talking about the relationship between himself and alcohol and his children and his ex-wife and blah, 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 blah. And suddenly I'd be like, oh my God, Makar just tried to sneak that in the back door. And suddenly everybody's laughing because everybody likes a good backdoor reference, even though it's a hockey thing. It's a hockey thing, you guys. It's a hockey thing. So, I wanted to watch that, so we didn't get to record on Monday night, and then Monday itself was just really, really busy. Tuesday, same thing, lots of busyness, lots of things to get done. I did the research on the Huberman episode of his YouTube channel, which was really, really good. Like I said, really good, and around that, I had tasks in the morning, I had tasks at night. I had, my youngest had to go in for a scan of his knee, or my oldest had to go in for a scan of his knee, which was interesting. Like telling your kids that, hey, you're going to go in for a scan, and, these are the things that we're possibly worried about. However, I don't think it's something that you like. He was a little bit nervous. He's a little bit nervous about it, and rightfully so. It's not life-shattering, but it is something that he would have to work through, and there is always a possibility of surgery whenever there's some kind of an orthopedic injury. There's always a possibility of that. So I don't think anything's going to come of it, though. I think that what we're going to see is that he needs some physical therapy, and we'll move through that gracefully. And then last night, I had a conversation with my wife about some of the stressors that are going on in our lives. She's a traveling nurse. Along with that comes the expectation that every 13 weeks, she either has to move on or re-up with whatever company it is that she's currently working for. Well, this creates a certain amount of anxiety. That anxiety is primarily placed on her, but there's also all of the anxiety of me wanting to continue to be a stay-at-home parent, and how if I have to go back to working full-time, which is something that I'm willing but not happy to be doing. I'm in a very privileged place. I'm very lucky to be able to do what I do with, working on my fitness, working on my sobriety, working on content creation with you guys. And having a disruption in that would be very, very frustrating. So that adds stress to her life because she wants to be able to support me, but also wants to have the security of having a partner that produces the same amount of monetary value, just in case something terrible happens with her job. And then also the idea that, she now has to get used to another location somewhere. So it was a multifaceted hour and a half long conversation, and it wasn't contentious. It was me asking questions about trying to find where she was mentally, where she wanted to go in her career, and then the two of us having a conversation about where those potential places could be. So it wasn't contentious. It wasn't a fight or anything. It was far from it. At the end of it, it was one of those conversations where, I think that I have enough emotional intelligence to be able to look at her and say, listen, these are my concerns. These are the concerns that I have that I know that are a little bit selfish, but are still important to me. I recognize that you have concerns that are less selfish, but would impact me, potentially negatively. I want things to continue to move forward the way that they have, because I'm personally very comfortable. She is okay being in the operating room, but there is a certain amount of value to, having that little bit more financial security of having two incomes coming into the house that are of commensurate value. Like, it's not that I don't have income coming in. I do. It's a modest middle-class living. It's not a ton, but it augments hers. It's not a complement. It's not complementary in nature. So that was a conversation that we had last night. It ended up in a, kind of a positive space. And then these are just the sort of normal stresses that we've had, and they're all just very, very suburban stresses, right? Like, when are we going to do spring cleaning? Very suburban. Our basement looks a mess. Very suburban. How are the children's grades? Kind of suburban. Those are all the big concerns that we have right now. But none of it impacted my sobriety in any way, which is a really good thing, because usually I would have wanted to be loaded before we had the kind of conversation that we had last night. And then, of course, that conversation, I would not have had the emotional intelligence at hand to be able to have that conversation in any kind of a mature way. That would have been something where I would have broken down, been frustrated, been anxious and angry, and could very well see myself getting to a place where I spark a passive-aggressive fight. Now, I, since becoming sober, hate passive aggression. I hate it. I hate it when I do it. I hate it when other people do it around me. State your intention. State your position. Do it loud. Don't be an asshole about it, but make sure that, you say it with your chest. Be an adult about how you feel about things. And I found that it's been a lot easier for me to do that since I got sober. And I found that looking back upon most of the interactions that were negative while I was in my active alcoholism, they were very, very, very much a mixture of passive aggression and pity me style of sort of shitty personality traits. So trying to leave all that behind, trying to work on self-improvement in the realms of cynicism, passive aggression, and making sure that I am acting outwardly in an emotionally intelligent manner. That's me. That's my check-in for this week. Didn't drink, still sober, rocking the sobriety. Really, really excited about that. The workouts, the fitness, all of it, it never gets easier. Like, it never, ever, ever gets easier. Every single day that I go and work out, it always feels like the same level of difficulty as the week before, because I keep pushing the numbers up and up and up on what I'm lifting, how much I'm lifting, and the frequency in which I am lifting those things. So it never gets easier. I don't know that it ever will. There might be a place where I can get to a maintenance phase where I'm just lifting kind of the same thing every single time I go to the gym, because I just want to maintain what I've got instead of continuing to grow. I want to continue to grow. I had a conversation today with a lady who was like, what are your goals? What goals do you have? And I'm like, I just want to get to a point where I have basically maxed out my natural ability to grow muscle, and then I want to maintain that as much as I possibly can as I move into the latter half of my life. Because I think if I'm not there, if I'm at the age of 42, if I'm not at the halfway mark, I'm pretty close to it, or I've recently passed it. I got to think that, right? I mean, I think the cessation of alcohol, the fact that I don't indulge in eating shit the way that I used to, I've never been a big tobacco user, but even that is a rare vice that I take, pleasure in indulging in. I think that hopefully I will have some kind of longevity that I can look forward to as I'm seeing my, the relationship with my wife grow, seeing my children grow old, hopefully being a grandfather someday. That's what I would like to have happen. And the best way that I know how to do that is to keep up with the good habits, dump the bad habits, and, yeah. So still sober, still doing okay. As far as that is concerned. Yeah. So the Andrew Huberman thing. So recently I watched his takes on alcohol's effects on the body. Now, he really does focus on how this is the effect of alcohol on the body. Now, he has some prescriptives about alcohol. He does say that it is a poison, but he doesn't load it with moral meaning. He loads it with scientific meaning. We can look at something objectively and say, this is X without morally condemning it. And he does that in this chat. So if you have a chance after you're done on the toilet listening to this, go ahead, hop over to YouTube. It's an hour long. It's fantastic. Dr. Andrew Huberman. And he's got a whole other library, a gigantic catalog, like ABBA catalog of greatest hits of a whole bunch of things that you can do to kind of hack your life and hack your well-being, which is really, really kind of cool. So during the talk, he talks about the method of metabolization. I thought that this was very interesting. Alcohol has to go through two metabolic processes. One going from ETOH, so ethyl alcohol, not ethyl aldehyde. Fuck, did I get my? I may have mucked up the scientific terms. Anyways, so there's methanol, ethanol. That's not methyl aldehyde. Ethanol. So isopropyl, methanol, and ethanol. Ethanol is the stuff that we can drink. Methyl and iso we cannot drink. Those are not for human consumption. And if you think they are, please don't. Please don't. Very bad for you. Very, very bad for you. I have a big, gigantic jug of isopropyl alcohol I use for painting, not to be consumed by humans. Never, never, never. So he talks about the stages of digestion and metabolization. So one, it goes into your body. It gets processed in the liver. Ta-da! Surprise! Nobody knew that, right? Gets converted by the liver. Gets moved into acetaldehyde and then into acetate, I think is what it does. I'm going to go double check it real quick. Alcohol metabolisms. Just want to make sure that I get this correct. So acetaldehyde, yes, got it. So from ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate. Acetaldehyde is a poison. It is literally a poison. It's not even like a pseudo poison. No. It's real bad for you. He goes into the whole gamut of things that go wrong with your body with this. So he talks about the breakdown of alcohol within the body. Talks about what its effects are on things like your SSRI system, which is it's a mood and so serotonin is a mood and sleep hormone that happens in your brain. It's a chemical. Let's just call it a chemical. Serotonin, mood and sleep chemical, and how alcohol disrupts that by messing with the neurological receptors in your brain that bind to serotonin. So your sleep gets messed up, your moods get messed up. Talks about the hippocampus, talks about how it interrupts the creation of memory, interrupts hormone cycles throughout the body, interrupts the creation of cortisol, which is your primary stress mitigation hormone, and like it's interesting. We had a conversation really early on in the year last year about how the stress cycle that is kind of kicked off by consumption of alcohol, like you'll get home from a day at work and you're like, oh, I'm so stressed about work, I'm gonna have some booze. Well, your body, when you drink alcohol, cortisol is part of your natural way of mitigating stress. Now, alcohol sort of sends signals that kind of reinforce the creation of more cortisol, which can keep your body in a stressed state. So while you might feel relaxed brain-wise, your body is overcompensating for that by creating more cortisol. So he talks about that. He talks about people's predilection towards alcoholism and how you can see that there are some early warning signs that are associated with it. There's discussion about the gut biome and how it messes with your digestive system, the amount of possible cancers that can arise from chronic substance abuse, the mood disorders that arise from chronic substance abuse. And he talks about chronic substance abuse in the vein that you use specifically at specific times. It's not just about drinking the way that I used to drink, which was basically any time that I wasn't on call, I wanted to be drunk. No, it's much more broad than that. It's the chronic and continued use of alcoholism. So it's interesting, or of alcohol, excuse me, not alcoholism. He also talks about the positive effects. So he has a big gigantic listing of the negative effects, but then he also takes a look at the positive effects. Now, I might not have gotten everything correct. So yeah, I might have gotten a few things incorrect, but if you go over to his channel and watch it, it's a great watch. I think that people in recovery will say things like, well, alcohol is bad for us. Well, it's interesting to have a full laundry list of exactly what goes on in our bodies. It's fascinating to hear him talk about the genetic predisposition that some people show signs of in when they start drinking. It's very, very fascinating stuff. At least I thought it really, really was. And while I might not be 100% on every one of the facts that he laid out, and I would probably want to study it again at a later date to see how much of the knowledge stuck, I do think that I have a better understanding of exactly what goes on in the body as somebody that would still drink. Like I find that pretty darn fascinating. So yeah, totally think you should go and check his stuff out. So now I want to talk about boundaries. This is going to be a little bit more nebulous and hopefully a little bit more, maybe a little bit more concise. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see as we move into this. So what's a boundary? What is a boundary? What am I talking about with boundaries? So a boundary is just an area or a line that demarcates certain spaces in your life that there is acceptable or unacceptable actions that can be taken therein. I also think that there are boundaries that are primarily internal and primarily external. So when we talk about boundaries, and the sphere of activity that we will allow or disallow. I think that it's really, really, really important that we take a full inventory, or as full as we can get it, a full inventory of exactly what our boundaries for our own conduct and for other people's conduct around us should be. Now, that can be very, very difficult. Each one has pitfalls, all unique to themselves. Internal boundaries. I think internal boundaries are incredibly difficult. When I say internal boundaries, these are the things that we tell ourselves we are going to do or not do in an effort to corral our actions into a concise and principled moral stance that we hopefully have arrived at independent of outside influence. For instance, I have an internal standard that I hold myself to, an internal boundary. I will not drink. That's a boundary that I set for myself. That's one of the broadest boundaries that I can talk about in recovery, right? So when I said to myself, self, you fool, we will not drink. We will not drink. We will not do it. That's the line in the sand. That's the demarcation of the action that I will or will not participate in. That is really easy to say and much more difficult to do. I think that creating an internal boundary, something for yourself, I think that we do it 100 times a day. I think that we do it all the time. I think that we oftentimes do it so regularly that if we were to take a full inventory of how many boundaries we erect for ourselves and then check the ones off that we didn't complete or that we trespassed against, we would be shocked at how many times we let ourselves down. I think the biggest reason that happens, the biggest reasons that we cross an internal boundary is because we don't ever have a system of accountability for any boundary that we don't have to say out loud. So when we're creating our internal boundaries, especially the ones that are around recovery or any other type of mental health issue, I think it's important to find ways to enforce accountability on ourselves. So we create the internal boundary. We say to ourselves, this is an important line we do not want to cross. Now I need to go and find somebody to make this something that somebody else knows about. So my internal boundary becomes something that somebody else can look on from an external source and say, you are fucking this up, or you are living up to this boundary. And that's a good thing. External boundaries. External boundaries are the boundaries that we place upon other people's activities and actions as it pertains to our immediate space, and sometimes a little bit beyond our immediate space. But these are the kind of codes of conduct that we expect other people around us to kind of broadly, generally adhere to. These are important for a couple of reasons. One, they are a form of self-care. Me having boundaries for other people, letting them know that there are certain things that they can do to make me upset, is an important part of self-care. If I go to my friend Fireball's house and I do not set the boundary, hey, please don't offer me a drink. I'm in recovery. It's insensitive. It will frustrate and irritate me if you offer me a drink. I recognize that it might not be coming from a place where you're trying to frustrate and irritate me. Nevertheless, this is my space. This is my mental space. This is something that will alter that mental space. If it's something that is crossed, I will have to extricate myself from your immediate vicinity and move on and potentially not spend any more time with you. I think that external boundaries are difficult to implement because oftentimes we don't even know what they can possibly be. So one, there is the possible feeling of confronting somebody else with what your boundary is. I have to go to Fireball and say to him preemptively, hey, please don't offer me a drink. Or in the moment that he offers me a drink for the very first time after I'm in recovery, say, hey, I'm in recovery. I would appreciate it if you didn't offer me a drink from here on out. That can be difficult if you have a problem with approaching friends with something that is deeply vulnerable. Being in recovery means telling people that you're in recovery sometimes, and that can be hard to do. It can be hard to do for a couple of reasons. One, because you're externalizing an internal sensation of an experience that you have on a regular basis. That can be difficult. That can be hard, especially when there is a stigma attached to alcoholism. No two ways about it, right? So the assertion of boundaries is difficult. The reinforcing of boundaries is also difficult because within that reinforcement comes the possibility that you will lose access to somebody that you might care about because you need to move yourself away from whatever it is that they are doing that crosses a boundary of yours. That's really, really difficult. If Fireball gets drunk and continues to offer me drinks throughout the night, I'm going to have a harder and harder time with that, potentially, as the evening goes on. And at some point in time, I might need to say, hey, I have a boundary. You need to respect this, please. And if they continue to violate that, I need to be able to be mature enough that I can say, I can't be around you anymore, and I need to leave. I have to risk hurting a relationship that might be very, very important to me. In this case, one, Fireball would never do this to me. Two, losing my friendship with Fireball would suck. Would fucking suck. It's not something that would ever come up. It's just an example, right? So there's the reinforcing, and then not treating that reinforcement like an ultimatum, but instead making sure that when your boundary is crossed, you extricate yourself. You move yourself away from that which is causing you to be uncomfortable. That's really, really important. And these are things that these two things are so important to making sure that the space that you occupy, the space that you move through life in, is one that you're not having to continually feel as if you are walking on eggshells around other people. Saying it with your chest, being upright, being forthright, not upright, being forthright with how you feel about given situations without being an asshole about it, obviously. So yeah, internal and external, asserting and reinforcing. Oftentimes I see people that have a hard time feeling uncomfortable or feeling hurt. They have a hard time asserting their initial boundaries or reinforcing them at a later date. And they allow other people to continue to negatively affect them in perpetuity. I just recently had a conversation with somebody who is finally divorcing their partner after years of their partner being abusive. Years of doing this because they didn't want to draw the line in the sand and they didn't want to reinforce it. They just kept hoping and hoping that this person would someday come to their senses out of nowhere and finally start treating them the way that they actually deserve to be treated, which is kindly and well and lovingly. But that didn't happen. So I said to this person that I was incredibly proud of them because finally they asserted a boundary, an external boundary. They reinforced that boundary, and now they are living by the consequences of that boundary. A consequence isn't necessarily a bad thing. A consequence can be a good thing. It's just a necessary fallout from a decision or a position or a set of actions. That's it. That's all it is. It's not necessarily punitive, although it can be. It's not necessarily a good thing, although it can be. So I was very, very excited for this person. I'm very excited that hopefully they can move into a phase of their life where they are taking more care of themselves and not having to continue to be abused by this other party. Very, very excited about that. So, the last point of this that I want to touch on is the idea that, especially in internal boundaries, the lines between that can be incredibly muddy. Self-deception is absolutely 100% a thing when it comes to the initial creation and the reassertion of the boundaries that we create for ourselves. This was like maybe 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, I told my wife that I wanted her to tell me to stop drinking, to ask me to stop drinking. One night we're in bed, I'm drunk, and she's like, I really don't like it when you're drunk. And this should have been warning bell, but it wasn't. Why? Because I was self-deceiving. So I told her, hey, ask me to stop drinking. Ask me to stop drinking. And she did. She asked me to stop drinking. And for a good 2 months-ish, 2 or 3 months, I don't remember exactly how long it was, I stopped drinking. I did. I deceived myself that entire time thinking I'm doing this because I'm proving to my wife that I can do this in order to take control of this substance back and to be able to engage in it in a way that I deem appropriate and acceptable. And it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. Of course it fucking wasn't. I was an addict then. I knew that I was having problems with alcohol. I was hoping that an external source would help. I was deceiving myself in believing that that would be enough. Like I needed a rock bottom moment, and that wasn't it. Not yet. That wouldn't come for a couple of years, unfortunately. So I created a boundary, or I asked my wife to help me create a boundary. I created a boundary, and then I deceived myself into allowing that boundary to continue to be crossed. And then I started deceiving my wife into allowing me to deceive, or to continue to cross that boundary. Like over and over and over again. One of the reasons that saying I'm an alcoholic is so incredibly powerful is that it doesn't give me any space for self-deception. It gives me zero space for that. It literally just says, this is something chronic. This is like being somebody with a heart condition or somebody with diabetes or somebody with any other disease process that you can think of that people have to live and mitigate for the rest of their lives. I will have to live and mitigate this for the rest of my life. And knowing that gives me a firm foundation where I cannot deceive myself into thinking, well, I finally got control over this. Some people can moderate after coming through a period of alcoholism. Some people can do that, apparently. This is what the research somewhere shows. Somewhere, I don't know where. But I've been told by figures of authority that this is true. But for those of us that we can't moderate afterwards, we really can't moderate. And I feel like I'm one of those guys that just really, really can't moderate. So we're getting a little bit long-winded here. We're at about 40 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to me jaw jack this entire fucking time. If you heard anything during the podcast that you have a quibble, a thought, a concern about, you can find me Wednesday and Sunday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time over on our Twitch and our YouTube channels. You can also drop a comment on the YouTube or find us on Twitch on Twitter at @versus_save, or on Facebook, Save versus Poison Podcast on Facebook. You can find us any of those locations. You can tell me that I'm an idiot, that I didn't handle this episode very well, that I'm literally the most amazing thing that's ever happened to alcoholics ever. Any of those things. You can say a combination of, you are the most awesome idiot that I've ever heard. There we go. That'll work. That'll fucking work. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in again to another episode of Save versus Poison. Matt, if you're listening to this, I'm gonna try to have something for you in a couple of days. Yeah, I'm gonna try to have something for you, buddy. Winky. Don't have much else to chat about tonight. The gaming takes, we're playing Warframe, playing some Battletech, playing some MechWarrior. Tonight on the stream, you won't see this or hear this until after I actually have done it, but you can go check the VOD out on YouTube. I'm going to be painting some Battletech miniatures using oil paints. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so we'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll get the show scheduled to record on Monday or Tuesday, so I can have the full complement of my co-host back with me. We might do a ticky take, depending how much I need to grovel and apologize for not having this week be all three of us. But from all of us here at Save vs. Poison Podcast, which is mostly just me right now. It's just me. Like, Ticky's not thinking about you guys. Steve, not thinking about. He's thinking about donuts. He's thinking about that movie. And Ticky's thinking about Steven Seagal and Nicolas Cage. French kissing. You're welcome, America. Enjoy that visual. From all of us here, I'm Will, and I wish you warm, creamy regards. You guys all take care of yourselves. Good night. You've just listened to another episode of the Save vs. Poison podcast. If you liked what you heard, please follow us, like, and subscribe on Twitter at @VS_save. On Facebook at the Save vs. Poison Podcast, and streaming live on Twitch at twitch.tv/SVP Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and stay safe, everyone.